Before the earth had a name, there was no earth to name. There was chaos, not chaos in the sense that the later world would use the word, not disorder, not the confusion of many things in conflict with each other, not the noise of things that have not yet been organized. The word the later world made from this first condition was not adequate to it, was a word built from the experience of order and its absence, built by beings who knew what organization was and described chaos as its negative. But the first condition was not the negative of anything. It was prior to the distinction. It was the state before the existence of the difference between organized and unorganized, before the existence of the difference between anything and anything else. It was not dark. Darkness requires the possibility of light, requires that light exists somewhere, that the absence of it in a specific place be the condition that darkness names. There was no light anywhere, and therefore no darkness anywhere, and therefore the distinction between them had not yet been made. The first condition was not dark and was not light, and was not the space between those two things. It was the condition before space, before the distinction between here and there, before the existence of the difference between any one thing and any other thing. Then something changed. The change was not a sound, and was not a light, and was not the arrival of any force from outside the first condition, because outside did not exist and inside did not exist, and the distinction between them had not yet been made. The change was more fundamental than any of those things, the most fundamental possible change, the change from the indifferentiated to the differentiated, the change from the condition in which nothing was distinct from anything else to the condition in which something was beginning to be distinct. Gaia emerged, not arrived. Arrived implied a coming from somewhere, a movement through space toward a destination, and space had not yet fully established itself as space. Not was created. Created implied a creator external to the creation, a force that acted on the material to produce the result, and there was no external force, nothing outside the first condition that could have acted on it. Emerged is the closest word, the word that comes nearest to what actually happened, the ground establishing itself from the groundlessness, the way a form establishes itself in deep water, not by arriving but by becoming distinct, by acquiring the quality of being a specific thing rather than the indifferentiated everything. She was the earth, not a goddess who ruled the earth, not a divine being whose domain was the earth, not a personification of the earth in the sense of a human-shaped thing standing for something larger than itself. She was the earth, the thing itself, the ground itself, the first solidity, the first distinction between what was below and what was above, between what was dense and what was not yet dense, between the gathered and the ungathered. Her first quality was weight. Weight was the first quality of the earth, the quality of having gathered, of having condensed from the indifferentiated into the dense and the specific, of being the thing that had come together rather than remained apart. She felt this weight not as a burden but as herself. The weight was what she was, the gathering was what she was, the quality of the dense and the solid and the deep was her most fundamental nature. Her awareness was not like any other awareness. She was not conscious in the way that beings with minds are conscious. There was no interior voice, no stream of thought, no experience of time passing in the way that a mind experiences time passing. Her awareness was presence, the absolute and complete presence of the thing that is entirely what it is, the awareness of the ground that knows itself as ground not by thinking about it but by being it, completely and without remainder. She felt her own depths. The depths of the early earth were not the depths of the formed world, not the organized layers of stone and heat, and the deep geological structures that the world would develop across the ages of its existence. The early depths were the first depths, the depth of the thing that had just gathered itself from the ungathered, the depth that was simply the quality of there being a below, a quality of the earth extending downward into itself in the first expression of what depth was. The first stone was cold, not the cold of the cold world, not the cold of the winter air or the cold of the deep water or the cold of the high places. The cold of the first stone was the cold of the first solid thing, the cold that was simply the quality of the dense, in a world that had not yet developed the heat that would eventually come from within it. She felt this cold in the quality that was her feeling, not as discomfort, not as the sensation of a body that was too cold, but as the texture of herself, the particular quality of what she was in this first state of her existence. The first soil was dark. It was dark in the way of the first things, completely, without the mixture of other qualities that would come later, without the complexity that the long ages of the world's development would introduce. The dark of the first soil was the pure dark of the thing that had not yet been touched by light, that existed in the quality of its own density, without the intervention of anything from above. She lay in this quality. She lay in the quality of the first earth, the cold stone and the dark soil and the depth that extended below the surface into the gathering that had made her. And she was entirely and completely herself, in the way that only the first things were entirely and completely themselves, without the complication of relationship, without the presence of anything other than what she was. The surface of the world was still, not the stillness of a thing that had stopped moving, the stillness of a thing that had not yet begun to move in the way that movement would eventually mean, the stillness of the first state of the first thing, the absolute and complete stillness of the ground before anything had ever walked on it or grown in it or moved through it or changed it in any way. She felt the stillness as herself. She felt the quality of the first earth, the cold and the dark and the depth and the weight and the absolute stillness of the world before the sky, and she was it, completely and without reservation. The oldest thing in existence lying in the quality of its own first being. Above her was nothing, not the sky. The sky had not yet come, not the darkness of the night sky. Night and day had not yet distinguished themselves from each other. Above the surface of the first earth was the quality of the first condition, the indifferentiated, the not yet sky that was present above her, the way the not yet anything had been present before she had emerged from it. She waited, not with impatience. Impatience required the experience of time as something that was passing too slowly, and the experience of time had not yet arrived in the form that impatience required. She waited with the quality of the earth, the geological patience that was not patience in the ordinary sense, but simply the quality of being entirely what you are in the present moment, without the leaning toward what was coming, without the quality of a being that needed anything other than what it was. She was the first complete thing. She lay in the quality of her own completeness, and the world above her was still the not yet sky, the quality of the first condition remaining above the surface of the new earth, and the deep cold stone was below, and the dark soil was at the surface, and the depths extended downward into the gathering that was her most fundamental nature. And the first world breathed in the way of the earth breathing, not with lungs, not with the movement of air in and out of the body in the biological sense, the slow and enormous breath of the ground itself, the quality of the first solid thing existing in the first moment of its existence, entirely itself, entirely still, entirely present to the quality of what it was to be the first and oldest and most patient thing in the world. The surface of the earth was dark and cold and still, and above it, not yet, not quite yet, something was beginning to stir in the quality of the indifferentiated, the first intimation of what would come, the first faint quality of a distinction beginning to form in the not yet sky above the surface of the first world. She felt it beginning. She felt it beginning. The quality of the indifferentiated above her surface stirring in the way that the indifferentiated stirred when something was about to become something, and she lay in the cold and the dark of the first earth, and felt the change arriving with the patience of the ground that had no need to hurry what was already on its way. The sky came from her. This is the thing that the later tradition did not always hold clearly, that Uranus was not something that arrived from outside, not a force that came to Gaia from elsewhere and took up residence above her. He arose from her. She produced him from her own being in the way that the earth produces what it produces, not through the deliberate act of a conscious will making a decision, but through the quality of the earth's own nature expressing itself, the ground generating from itself the complement that its own nature required. She had always contained the sky. This was the truth beneath the emergence, that what became Uranus had been present in Gaia from the beginning, present in the first gathering of the indifferentiated into the solid, present in the quality of the earth as a potential that the earth's own development would eventually express. The sky was in the earth the way the atmosphere is in the planet, the way the gas is in the stone, the way all the qualities of a world are contained in the initial conditions of that world, and expressed as the world develops through the long process of becoming what it is. He rose from her, in the way that the atmosphere rises from the earth, not dramatically, not with the force of a volcanic emergence, but gradually, the way the quality of the air above the ground establishes itself from the quality of the ground, the way the surface of the earth communicates itself upward into the air directly above it. He rose in the gradual and complete way of things that are becoming rather than arriving, the quality of the sky establishing itself above the surface of the earth in the first long movement of his emergence. The first quality he had was light, not the light of the sun. The sun was not yet, would not be for a long time, but the quality of the sky itself had a light in it that was different from the darkness of the first earth, a quality of luminosity that was the sky's own nature, rather than the reflected light of any external source, the first light that the world had that was not the absence of darkness, but the presence of something, the particular quality of the sky's own being expressed as the first illumination of the world's surface. Gaia felt the light. She felt it on her surface, the first surface that had ever received light, the first ground that had ever been touched by what was above it, rather than existing in the absolute quality of its own deep dark. The light moved across her in the way of the first light, slowly, completely, touching the cold stone and the dark soil with the quality of something that was entirely new, that the surface of the earth had no experience of, and no framework for except the direct sensation of the receiving. It was warm. The warmth was slight, not the warmth of the full sun, not the warmth of the later world's days. The faint warmth of the sky's own presence above the earth. The warmth of the first relationship between the two great things. The quality of the sky that was not only light, but the beginning of the heat that light eventually produced in the things it touched. She felt him above her. She felt the quality of his presence the way the earth feels the quality of the sky, not through any specific sense, not through sight or hearing or touch in the biological sense, but through the presence itself, the quality of a thing existing above her that had not existed above her before, the change in the nature of what was above her surface that his emergence had produced. He was vast. He was the entirety of the sky, from one horizon to the other, from the edge of the earth on every side to the highest point of the vault above the center, the whole of the heaven that covered the earth. His vastness was different from her vastness. Hers was the vastness of the deep and the dense, the vastness of the gathered, the enormous weight and extent of the solid world extending in all directions. His was the vastness of the spread and the high, the vastness of the open, the quality of an expanse that was not dense but boundless, not gathered but extended. They were the complement of each other. This was the first and most fundamental truth of their relationship. Not that they chose each other, not that they came together through any act of will or desire in the ordinary sense. They were the complement of each other in the most structural possible sense, the way that above and below are complements, the way that the surface of the earth and the sky above it are complements, the way that two things that define each other by being what the other is not are complements. The sky came down to the earth. He did not remain at the high distance of the later sky. The sky of the established world, the sky that is above and separate and defined by its separateness from the earth below it. In the beginning, the sky came all the way down, pressed against the surface of the earth the way the atmosphere in its earliest form pressed against the ground. The quality of the sky and the quality of the earth meeting without the space between them that would come later. She received him. She received the sky the way the earth receives rain, not passively, not as a surface that simply accepted what was placed on it, but with the quality of the earth in relationship, the deep and slow and complete reception of the thing that completed her, the quality of the ground receiving what the ground needed. She received him with the full quality of what she was, the patient and deep and ancient earth opening to the presence of the sky that had come from her own being and had returned to her in the first embrace. The world was the embrace. This is what the early world was. Not the earth and the sky as two separate things with a relationship between them, but the quality of the embrace itself as the condition of the world. The earth and sky so completely together that the world was the meeting rather than the space between the met things. The first world had no horizon in the ordinary sense, no visible line where the earth ended and the sky began. The sky pressed down to the earth and the earth rose up to the sky, and between them was not the space of the later world, but the quality of the first contact, the first meeting of the two great things. Gaia felt the completeness of it. She felt it in the way she felt everything, not through thought, not through the articulated experience of a conscious mind receiving and processing and interpreting. She felt it as the quality of herself in the new condition, the quality of the earth in the presence of the sky, the particular wholeness of the thing that has found its complement, and exists now in the quality of the completed rather than the merely sufficient. She had been sufficient alone. This was true. She had been the first complete thing entirely herself, entirely sufficient in her cold and dark and still quality, needing nothing to be what she was. The arrival of the sky did not complete what had been incomplete. It added to what had been complete a quality that completeness alone could not have. The quality of the completed thing in relationship, the quality of the whole that was also in the presence of another whole, and was changed by that presence into something that was more than the sum of the two wholes. The light moved across her surface. It moved in the way of the first light moving across the first earth, slowly, with the quality of something that was both entirely new and entirely natural, something that the earth's surface had not known, and that the earth's surface received as if it had always been waiting for exactly this. The stone caught the light and returned it with a particular quality of stone in the first light, cold still, but no longer only cold, the cold now in the presence of the warmth, the dark now in the presence of the light. The quality of the earth changed by the presence of the sky, without the earth ceasing to be what it was. She felt the first rain. The first rain came from the first clouds that the sky produced from his own nature. The water that the sky carried and released in the first expression of the sky's relationship with the earth below. The rain fell on the surface of the first earth, and the earth received it, and the quality of the soil changed in the receiving. The dark soil taking the water in the way of soil that has always been made for water. The stone collecting the water in its first hollows and crevices. The surface of the world becoming for the first time the surface that was wet as well as dry. That was the meeting place of the sky's water and the earth's stone. She felt the seeds of things, in the quality of the rain on the stone and the soil, in the first warmth of the sky's light on the surface of the earth. Something was beginning that she felt in the way she felt her own depths, as a quality of herself that was developing, the potential of the earth expressing itself in response to the conditions that the sky had brought. The first stirrings of what would eventually be the growing world were present in the quality of the rain, wet earth in the first light, present not yet as growing things, but as the potential of growing things, the earth in the condition that growing things required. The sky was warm above her, and she was the ground beneath the sky. The cold, deep, patient earth receiving the light and the warmth and the rain of the sky's presence with the quality of the earth in its first relationship, the oldest and the most fundamental relationship in the world, the relationship from which all other relationships in all the ages of the world would eventually descend. She was not alone. She was not alone, and the quality of the not aloneness moved through her in the slow and geological way that all things moved through her, not quickly, not with the urgency of a being who had been waiting and was now relieved, but with the deep and patient quality of the earth receiving what had come to it, and finding in the receiving a new condition that was simply completely the new condition. The children came. They came in the way that the first things came, not through any process that resembled the later processes of birth, not through the specific biological sequence that the mortal world would develop for the production of new life. They came through the quality of the two great presences, the earth and the sky together, the embrace that was the world, generating from the quality of their togetherness the forces that the world required to be more than the two great presences alone. The first were the Titans, 12 children, 6 sons and 6 daughters, born from the first and greatest union in the history of the world, each one carrying in their nature the quality of what the earth and the sky between them had produced. They were not small. Nothing of this age was small. They were the first generation of what would later be called gods, and they had the quality of the first things. The enormous and elemental quality of beings whose nature was not a refinement of the world's qualities, but the direct expression of those qualities in their most complete and most concentrated form. Oceanus came first. He was the ocean, not a god who ruled the ocean, not a divine being whose domain was the water that surrounded the world, but the ocean itself in the way that Gaia was the earth itself, the quality of the world's water expressed as a conscious and enormous presence. He poured from the embrace of his parents with the quality of water that had always been present in the world's making, filling the boundaries of the earth that Gaia's surface provided, becoming the great river that circled the world in the ancient understanding, the boundary of everything, the edge of the known. Hyperion carried the light. He was the light in its most complete and elemental form. Not the light of the sun exactly, not the specific light of the later solar body, but the quality of light as a principle, light as the thing that made seeing possible, light as the force that moved through the sky and touched the surfaces of the world and made them visible. He had the quality of his father's luminosity concentrated into a specific presence. The light of the sky made into the particular and directed light of the Titan of the shining. Themis came with the quality of order. She was the order that was in things before the order was established by any divine authority, not the law that was made by the powerful and enforced by their power, but the deeper law that the world contained in its own nature, the order that was prior to all ordering, the rightness of things that existed before anything had been declared right. She moved through the early world with the quality of someone who simply knew, without being told, what the structure of things required. Mnemosyne held the memory. She held the memory of everything that had happened since the first emergence of Gaia from chaos, not as a record kept in any external form, not as a library or an archive, but as the living presence of the past in the quality of her own being, the memory that was not a stored thing but a sustained thing, the past continuously present in the quality of the one who held it. She was the mother of the muses, and the grandmother of all the arts that depended on the human capacity to hold the past in mind and find in it the material of the present making. The others came, Koios and Crius and Iapetus and Phoebe and Tethys and Rhea. Each one was a world quality made into a presence. The intelligence of the sky in Koios, the measure of the stars in Crius, the mortal span in Iapetus who would father the sons who brought fire to the human world, the brightness of the moon in Phoebe, the fresh water that moved through the world's surface in Tethys, and Rhea, who was the earth in the way that her mother was the earth, but differently, not the deep and ancient earth of the beginning, but the earth of the surface, the earth that was also the mother, the earth as the quality of the fertile and the sustaining. Then came Kronos. He came last of the Titans, and he came with the quality that set him apart from his brothers and sisters from the first moment of his emergence, the quality of the one who would not simply be a world force, but would act on the world forces, who had in his nature not only the elemental quality of what he embodied, but the particular force of will that would make him the one who acted when action was required. He was time, the turning of things, the quality of the world that moved everything through its changes, that made the young old and the old pass away and the passing away make room for the new. He came into the world with a sickle-shaped quality to him from the beginning, the cutting edge of time present in his nature before he had ever held the blade that would make the first great cut in the history of the world. Gaia felt each emergence. She felt each child come from the quality of herself and Uranus, together with the particular quality of the earth feeling what it produces, not with pride in the ordinary sense, not with the emotional response of a mother in the later tradition, but with the deep and physical quality of the ground feeling what has grown in it and come from it, the awareness that was not thought but presence, the recognition that was not identification but the feeling of the thing that had been within now being without. Then came the Cyclops, 3 brothers, Brontes the thunder, Steropus the lightning, Argus the bright, born from the same embrace but carrying in their single eyes and their enormous strength a quality that was different from the Titan's quality, the quality of the raw and the elemental rather than the ordered and the divine. They were craftsmen before craft existed as a concept, makers before the world had making, the force of the storm organized into the form of beings who could not only embody the storm but work with it, who carried in their hands the potential of the thunder and the lightning that they would eventually give to Zeus in the age of the great wars. They were extraordinary, and they were overwhelming, even in the company of the Titans, even among the first and most enormous of all the world's children. The Cyclops had a quality that exceeded the ordinary scale of the divine. They were forces before they were beings, powers before they were presences, and their single eyes saw with a clarity that the paired eyes of the other divine beings did not entirely possess, the clarity of a vision that was concentrated rather than divided, that gave everything to the single seeing. Then came the Hecatoncheires, 3 beings, Cottus and Briareos and Aegis, each with 100 hands and 50 heads, each carrying in the multiplicity of their form the quality of an excess that was not the divine excess of the beautiful or the powerful, but the excess of the overwhelming, the quality of a force that was too much of itself for any single form to contain, that expressed its nature by exceeding the boundaries of what a single form could hold. Gaia felt them emerge with the full and complex quality of the earth feeling what it has produced. They were hers. They were entirely and completely hers, as all her children were hers, not in the possessive sense but in the sense of origin, in the sense of having come from her and carrying in their enormous natures the quality of what she and the sky between them had made. She felt the full quality of each of them. The 12 Titans with their elemental dignities, the 3 Cyclops with their concentrated force, the 3 Hecatoncheires with their overwhelming multiplicity, and she felt the world that they together were, the first and most complete and most extraordinary family that had ever existed or would ever exist. The world was full of them. The world that had been the 2 great presences, earth and sky, in their original embrace, was now the world of the children, the world that the children filled with their vast and various natures, each one expressing a quality of the world that the world required to be what it was going to be. The ocean moved in Oceanus, the light moved in Hyperion, the order held in Themis, the memory held in Mnemosyne, and Kronos moved through it all with the cutting quality of time, the youngest and the most dangerous, the child who had arrived last and who carried in his nature the seed of the thing that would change everything. Uranus looked at his children. He looked at them from the quality of the sky above, the vast and arching sky that pressed down to the earth, that had produced these children from the quality of the embrace, that was their father in the most complete and structural sense. He looked at them, and he felt something that the sky had not felt before, a quality of his own nature responding to what the children were, that was not the warmth of the light or the force of the storm. He felt afraid, and Gaia, deep in the quality of her own ancient awareness, felt the quality of that fear move through the embrace like the first cold wind, present, real, carrying in it the seed of the thing that neither of them could yet see clearly, but that was coming with the same patient inevitability as everything that had come before. Uranus felt afraid, and the fear moved through the embrace like the first cold wind, and Gaia felt it in the quality of the sky's presence above her, the change in the nature of what was above her surface, the quality of the sky that had been warm and complete and entirely present, now carrying in it this new quality, this cold and contracting quality of a presence that had looked at what it had produced and had found in the looking not wonder but the particular darkness of a powerful being, confronting the possibility of its own diminishment. He feared the hecatoncheires most. He feared them with the full and specific fear of a being who had looked at something, and understood immediately that what he was looking at exceeded him in a way that was not the exceeding of the merely more powerful, but the exceeding of the categorically overwhelming, the exceeding of something that was not simply stronger, but so much more of itself that the ordinary categories of strong and weak did not apply to the comparison. The 100 hands and the 50 heads, and the quality of force that the hecatoncheires carried, was not the force of the divine in the ordinary divine sense. It was the force of something that had been made from the deepest and most concentrated quality of the earth and sky together, and had come out the other side of the making as something that neither earth nor sky had fully intended. He feared the Cyclops too. He feared the single seeing eye and the craftsman's hands, and the quality of beings who carried the storm in themselves and could direct it, who were not simply the storm, but the makers of the storm's instruments, who had in their nature the potential to make the weapons that could be used against him. He had the instinct of the sky for the lightning, knew it as his own, as the expression of his nature in its most forceful form. To see the lightning in the hands of beings who were not himself was to see a power he had considered his own become a power that was other, a power that could be turned against the sky that had produced it. He feared Kronos last and most deeply. This was the fear that was not the fear of the overwhelming or the fear of the weaponized storm, but the fear of the particular child, whose nature was time, whose nature was the turning of things, whose nature was the force that made the young old and the powerful diminished, and the high brought low by the simple and inexorable passage of what time was. Kronos was the fear made specific, the particular child who carried in his nature the precise quality that was most threatening to the sky, father who had always been and wished always to be, who could not bear the quality of a being whose existence was the proof that what had been could become what had been. He acted on the fear. This is the thing that must be said plainly and attended to fully, that what came next was not accident, not the consequence of forces beyond his understanding or control. He looked at his children, and he was afraid of them, and he acted on the fear in the way of a powerful being, whose response to what it fears is not to understand the fear or to work with the fear, but to remove the source of the fear by the most direct means available to the power he possessed. He pushed them back. He pushed the children of his union with Gaia back into the earth, back into Gaia's body, back into the interior of the world from which they had emerged. Not all of them, not the Titans who had already established themselves in the quality of the world, but the Cyclops and the Hecatoncheires, the children whose quality most disturbed him, the children whose force and whose seeing and whose overwhelming multiplicity he could not bear to have in the world above the earth where he could see them. He used the weight of the sky. He used it the way he used everything, completely. The full force of the sky's presence pressing down on the earth's surface, the quality of the sky that had been the warmth and the light of the embrace becoming the force of the pressing, the sky using its weight to return what it had helped produce to the place from which it had come, the sky becoming the lid of the earth rather than the completion of it. The children went back into the dark. They went back with the quality of things returning to the interior that had produced them, not willingly, not with the resignation of beings who understood why they were being returned, but with the particular quality of enormous beings being moved by an enormous force. The Hecatoncheires with their 100 hands pressing against the stone of the world's interior, and the Cyclops with their single eyes, seeing the dark of the deep earth with the concentrated clarity of vision that was their nature, and finding in the dark nothing to see. Gaia felt it. She felt it in the most immediate and physical way that anything had ever been felt. Not the emotional pain of a mother whose children had been taken from her, not the grief of a conscious mind processing a loss, the physical reality of the children within her, the actual quality of enormous beings inside the body of the earth, the weight and the force and the movement of the Hecatoncheires with their 100 hands each pressing against her interior stone, the heat of the Cyclops contained within her deep places. She felt them inside her. She felt Cottus moving in the quality of the earth's lower depths, the 100 hands pressing against the stone walls of the world's interior with the patient and terrible force of something that was too large for the space it was in, that had known the world above and had been returned to the dark below, and did not stop pressing against the containment simply because the containment was the sky's will. She felt Briareos and Aegis with him, the three of them together filling the deepest chambers of the earth with the quality of their enormous presence, the heat of them warming the stone from the inside in the way that nothing had ever warmed the stone from the inside before. She felt the Cyclops. She felt Brontes with his thunder contained within the earth's interior, the thunder that had nowhere to go, that pressed against the stone with the quality of sound that could not find its way out, that built in the interior chambers of the world with the slow and terrible accumulation of a force being held against its nature. She felt Steropus and Argus with him, the lightning of Steropus building in the earth's deep places with the quality of light that had no opening through which to discharge itself, the brightness of Argus pressed into the dark of the interior where brightness was not what the dark permitted. The earth shook. The first earthquakes were this, the shaking of the ground that was Gaia's body responding to the quality of what was within it, the stone walls of the world pressing back against the pressing of the 100 hands, the surface of the earth communicating upward the quality of what was happening in the deep. The mountains moved slightly in their roots. The ground cracked in places where the pressure built beyond the capacity of the stone to contain it without expression. The first volcanoes were the earth's attempts to release what was being held. the heat and the force of the contained children, finding the thin places in the stone and pressing through them with the quality of everything that has been contained too long. Uranus watched from above. He watched from the quality of the sky, the vast and distant sky that had pressed down to the earth in the embrace and was now maintaining the pressure that kept the children within. The sky using its presence not as the warmth of the relationship, but as the force of the containment. He watched, and he felt the quality of the earth shaking below him with the quality of a powerful being who has done what he has done and is not going to undo it, who has looked at the consequence of his action and has decided that the consequence is preferable to the alternative. Gaia's grief was geological. It was not the grief of a conscious mind experiencing loss and processing it through the mechanisms of feeling and thought and the slow work of coming to terms. It was the grief of the earth itself, the grief that expressed itself in the shaking of the ground and the heat of the volcanoes and the quality of the stone that was under pressure it had not been designed to bear. It was the grief that built the way geological pressures built, slowly, across the enormous intervals of the Earth's own time, accumulating in the deep places where the children were held against their nature, growing in the quality of the stone that was being asked to contain what it could not indefinitely contain. She felt the titans above the surface. She felt them moving through the world that their father's fear had not yet taken from them, moving through the light that Hyperion made and the water that Oceanus carried and the order that Themis held and the memory that Mnemosyne preserved. She felt them with the quality of the earth feeling what moves on its surface, the particular awareness of the ground that knows what walks on it, that feels the quality of each presence through the contact of the presence with the earth. She felt Kronos. She felt the youngest Titan moving through the world with the cutting quality of time, the particular quality of a being who carried in his nature the force that would eventually produce the change that needed to be produced. She felt him, and she felt in the quality of his movement through the world the first edge of what she was beginning, slowly and with the full weight of the geological patience that was her most fundamental nature to understand was necessary. The children inside her pressed against the stone, the sky above pressed down, and Gaia lay between the pressing from above and the pressing from within. And the grief that was building in her had the quality of the earth's own deep processes, slow, enormous, entirely without urgency, entirely without the possibility of being stopped by anything the sky could do. It was already on its way. The grief was already on its way, and the children pressed against the stone of the world's interior, and the sky pressed down from above, and Gaia lay between the two pressures with the quality of the earth that has always been between the deep and the surface, between the below and the above, between what was held within her and what moved across her, patient and enormous and entirely without the possibility of remaining what she had been before the pressing had begun. She turned inward, not in the way of a conscious being making the decision to attend to something, not the deliberate redirection of awareness from the external to the internal that a mind made. She turned inward in the way of the earth turning inward, the quality of the ground attending to its own depths with a particular awareness of the thing that is also the place it is attending to, that does not observe the interior from outside, but feels it from within as the simple quality of its own existence. She felt what was there. She felt the hecatoncheires in the deepest chambers, Cottus and Briareos and Aegis with their 100 hands each pressed against the stone, their 50 heads each attending to the quality of the dark with a particular awareness of beings who had known the light and had been returned to the dark and held in the dark against the force of their own nature. She felt the specific quality of their containment, not the passive containment of things that had accepted their imprisonment, but the active containment of things that were still entirely themselves within the imprisonment, that had not diminished and had not surrendered, but were simply held, pressing continuously against the walls of their holding with the patient and enormous force of their nature. She felt what the holding cost. The cost was in the stone. The stone of the world's interior was not made for this, was not made to hold the force of 6 beings of this scale in permanent containment, was not designed by any intention, but was simply the stone of the earth as it had developed from the first gathering. The stone that had its own qualities and its own limits, and was now being pressed against those limits by the weight of the sky above and the force of the children within. The stone was changing, not breaking, not the catastrophic failure of a material that has exceeded its capacity in a single moment, changing in the way of stone under sustained pressure. The geological change that was slow and certain and entirely without the drama of the sudden. The change that could be felt across the long intervals of the earth's own time as a quality of the stone becoming different from what it had been, developing in the deep places a quality of stress that was the stone's own record of what it was being asked to hold. She made the sickle. The making of it was the most significant act she had performed since the emergence of the sky from her own being, more significant than any of the births, more significant than any of the ordinary processes of the earth's development across the ages of her existence. The births had been the natural expression of her nature in relationship with the sky. The making of the sickle was the first act that was not the expression of the natural, but the response to the unnatural, the first act that was made necessary, not by the quality of her own being, but by the quality of what had been done to that being. She made it from the gray flint of the deep earth. She made it from the flint that was in her own body, the gray adamantine flint that was the hardest of the earth's substances, that had developed in the deep places across the long ages of the earth's geological history, that carried in its crystalline structure the quality of the earth's own making concentrated into the material that was most completely itself, most fully the expression of the deep stone at the quality of its hardest and most enduring nature. The making was not quick. Nothing she did was quick. Quickness was not a quality that the earth possessed or valued or was capable of in the way that the later ages would value it. The making was the slow and complete process of the earth working with the earth's own material, the flint being shaped from its rough form into the curved form of the sickle blade, through the patient application of the earth's own intelligence to the earth's own substance. She felt the curve of it. The sickle was curved in the way of the new moon, not by any design that referred to the moon, not as a symbol of anything beyond what it was, but because the curve was the form that the function required, the form that would allow the blade to do what the blade needed to do in the specific and particular act it was being made for. She felt the curve in the quality of the stone that she was shaping, felt the rightness of the form arriving as the form developed, the way a form always arrived in the making, not as a decision but as a recognition, the recognition of the form that had always been in the material, waiting for the maker who knew how to find it. The blade was sharp. It was the first sharp thing, not the first hard thing. The earth had always had hardness, had been made of hard things from the beginning. The stone of the first gathering hard in the way of the first solid things. But the sharp was different from the hard. The sharp was the hard concentrated into the edge, the quality of the material at the point where its hardness was directed into the single line of the cutting edge, the line that was the meeting of the two surfaces of the blade at the point where they were most completely the blade. She called to her children. She called into the interior of herself, into the deep places where the imprisoned children were held, into the stone chambers where the hecatoncheires pressed their 100 hands and the Cyclops held their contained lightning. She called not with sound in the ordinary sense, not with the movement of air that produced the pressure waves that the ear received. She called with the quality of the earth calling, the vibration of the stone itself, the quality of the ground communicating through its own substance to what was within it, the way the earth communicated everything it communicated through the medium of itself. They heard her. They heard her with the particular quality of beings who were inside the thing that was speaking, who received the communication not through the air, but through the stone, through the direct contact of their bodies with the body of the earth that was also their mother, through the quality of the ground itself, carrying the message in the vibration of the stone against the stone of their own containment. She told them what she had made. She told them the quality of the sickle, the gray flint and the curved form and the sharp edge and the weight of it and the quality of its making. And she told them what she intended for it, what the sickle was for, and what the sickle required, and what the act of the sickle would mean for the quality of the world above the earth and the world within the earth and the relationship between the sky and the earth that had produced them all. She asked which of them would take it. The silence that followed was the silence of the deep earth, the silence of beings of enormous scale and force, hearing what was being asked of them, and feeling the full quality of what the asking meant. Not the silence of nothing being there, the silence of very large things attending to a very large question, the silence of the 100-handed ones and the Cyclops inside the earth feeling the full weight of what the sickle was, and what it would do, and what the doing would require of the one who did it. The hecatoncheires did not speak. She felt their quality of not speaking, felt the 100 hands of each of them, and the 50 heads of each of them attending to the question with the full force of their enormous beings, and arriving at the not speaking not from fear exactly, but from the quality of beings who were too much of themselves for the particular act the sickle required, who were force rather than will, who could press against the stone of their imprisonment with their 100 hands, but could not hold the curved blade, and do the precise thing the curved blade required. The Cyclops were silent too. Their silence had a different quality. The silence of the single eye seeing what was being asked, and seeing it with a concentrated clarity that was the nature of the single seeing, seeing the full consequence of the act, and the full quality of what the act would cost, and the full shape of the world that would come after the act, and finding in the seeing not the answer to whether they would do it, but the fullness of the understanding of what it was. Then Cronos spoke. He spoke from the quality of the Titans above the surface. She felt him through the contact of his feet on her ground, felt the quality of his response to her calling coming back through the stone in the particular vibration of the Titan, whose nature was time, whose nature was the cutting quality of the thing that ended ages and began new ones. He spoke, and his speaking had the quality of a being who had been waiting for exactly this question, who had recognized in the asking the form of what his nature had always been moving toward. He said he would take it. She felt the quality of his saying, not relief, not the emotional response of a mother whose child had volunteered for the dangerous thing, the geological quality of the next thing arriving, the quality of the earth recognizing the form of the consequence that had been building since Uranus had first looked at the children with fear, the recognition of the step that the long pressure had been building toward. She brought the sickle up through the stone. She brought it through the quality of her own substance, up through the deep chambers and the geological layers and the roots of the early mountains and the close-packed stone of the world's crust, to the surface where Kronos waited with the particular quality of the youngest Titan, who had said yes to the thing that no one else had said yes to. He took it. He held the gray flint sickle in the quality of his hands, and felt the weight of it and the sharpness of it and the curve of it that was the curve of the new moon, and he felt what it was, felt the quality of the first made thing made for the first necessary act, the thing that had come from the earth's own body for the purpose that the earth's own grief had made necessary. The sky above was bright and vast and entirely unaware, and Kronos held the sickle, and the deep earth was still with the quality of the thing that has set the next event in motion, and is now in the quality of the waiting that precedes the arrival of what has been made inevitable. Kronos held the sickle, and the deep earth was still with the quality of the thing that has set the next event in motion, and the sky above was bright and vast and entirely unaware, and the waiting had the quality of all the most significant waitings, not the waiting of impatience, not the waiting of uncertainty, but the waiting of the inevitable that has not yet arrived but is no longer possible to prevent. He waited for the night. The night in the early world was different from the night of the later world. Not the night that was defined by the absence of the sun, not the measured darkness of the established cycle of day and night that the later world's astronomy would chart and predict and name. The night of the early world was the quality of Uranus descending, the sky coming down to the earth in the embrace that had always been between them, the sky pressing toward the earth with the quality of the first relationship, the quality of the two great presences coming together in the way they had always come together since the sky had first arisen from the earth's own being. Kronos went to the earth's edge. He went to the place where the sky came closest to the earth in the quality of the night's embrace, the place where the distance between his father and his mother was smallest, where the sky pressed most fully toward the ground, where the quality of the two great presences in their meeting was most concentrated and most complete. He went there with the sickle, and he lay in the quality of the ground with the patience that was his mother's quality more than his own, the patience of the earth in the stone of the place where he waited. He was still with a quality that was not his ordinary quality. Kronos was not a being of stillness, was not made for the geological patience that was Gaia's most fundamental nature. His nature was movement, the turning of things, the cutting passage of time through what time passed through. But he was still now with the quality of the thing that has committed itself to an act, and is waiting for the conditions of the act to arrive. The stillness of complete attention directed toward a single point. The sky descended. Uranus came down toward the earth in the quality of the night's embrace. the vast and arching sky pressing toward the ground with the warmth of the relationship that had always been between them, with the quality of the two great presences coming together, that was the oldest and most fundamental quality of the world. He came without awareness of what waited at the earth's edge. He came with the quality of the sky doing what the sky had always done, moving toward the earth in the dark with the warmth of the first relationship, the sky that had arisen from the earth returning to the earth in the quality of the embrace that was the world's original condition. Gaia felt him coming. She felt the quality of his descent with the full awareness of the earth receiving the sky, the warmth of the sky's presence moving toward her surface, the quality of the first relationship arriving again in the way it always arrived, and she held the full complexity of what she felt in the way she had always held the most complex things, not by resolving the complexity, but by being large enough to contain it, the earth containing what it contained without requiring it to be simpler than it was. She felt the love still. This was the truth she held in the deep of what she was, that the love was still present, was still real, was still the quality of the earth for the sky that had arisen from her own being, and had covered her, and completed her, and been the complement of her enormous nature. The love was present, and the grief was present, and the anger was present, and the necessity was present, and she held all of them in the same quality of the earth, holding everything that was in it, without preference, without the desire to have any of them be other than what they were. Kronos moved. He moved in the dark with the quality of the Titan whose nature was time, the movement that was not the slow movement of the geological force, but the precise and directed movement of the will that had committed to the act, the movement of the cutting edge finding the moment for which it had been made. He moved in the dark at the earth's edge, where the sky was coming down toward the ground in the embrace, and the sickle was in his hand, and the curve of it caught the quality of the dark, in the way of the new moon catching the dark. He struck. The act was quick in the way that only the most significant acts are quick. The long preparation and the long waiting, producing at the moment of the act itself a swiftness that was the concentration of all the slowness that had preceded it. The way the long geological pressure produced the sudden movement of the earthquake, the way the long accumulation produced the swift release. The sickle moved through the dark with the quality of the first cutting, the first use of the first made thing for the purpose for which it had been made. The sky was wounded. The wounding of Uranus was the first wound, the first damage done to a divine being, the first time the quality of the intact had become the quality of the breached. He cried out with the quality of the sky crying out, not the cry of a mortal, not the sound produced by lungs and throat and the biological mechanisms of the cry. The cry of the sky was the quality of the sky in pain, the particular quality of the vast and arching heaven that had always been intact, finding itself no longer intact. The blood fell. It fell from the wound of the sky toward the earth below. Not blood in the biological sense, not the red fluid of the mortal body. The quality of what fell from the wounded sky was the essence of the sky itself, the distilled quality of the divine in the form of the falling fluid, the substance that was the sky's own nature expressed in liquid form, and falling now toward the earth in the quality of the first falling thing. Where the blood touched the sea, foam arose. The quality of the sky's essence meeting the quality of the ocean produced at their meeting something that was neither. The foam that was the threshold between the two. The quality of the meeting of divine sky and divine sea that was also the beginning of something that had not yet fully arrived, that was present now only as the quality of the foam and the particular warmth of it, and the faint and extraordinary quality of what the foam was going to produce in the ages still ahead. Where the blood fell on the earth, the Furies arose, the Uranus, the three great beings of retribution and vengeance, the forces that pursued those who violated the most fundamental of all bonds, arose from the quality of the sky's blood on the earth's surface with a particular quality of things that were made from wound and grief. They arose fully formed and fully themselves, carrying in their nature the quality of what had produced them, the wound of the Sky Father, the grief of the Earth Mother, the act of the Sun, the violation of the bond between parent and child, that was the oldest bond in the world. The giants arose from the blood on the earth too. They arose with the enormous and earthly quality of beings who were made from the meeting of the sky's divine essence and the earth's surface, carrying in their nature the quality of both their parents in the particular combination that the wound had produced. Not the ordered quality of the Titans, not the overwhelming quality of the Hecatoncheires, but the combative quality of beings who were made from the moment of the act itself, who carried in their nature the quality of the conflict that had produced them. Uranus retreated. He retreated with the quality of the wounded sky retreating, not the descent of the embrace, not the coming down of the first relationship, but the rising away of the sky that had been wounded at the place of its closest approach to the earth. He rose from the earth's edge where Kronos had waited, and rose through the quality of the dark toward the high distance that would become his permanent condition. The sky no longer pressing toward the earth in the embrace, but retreating to the distance of the established sky, the sky that was above and separate and defined by the space between itself and the earth below. The space opened. For the first time in the existence of the world, there was genuine space between the earth and the sky, not the quality of the first condition before the sky had arisen, not the indifferentiated above that had preceded Uranus. The genuine space of the separation, the space that was the new condition of the world, the space that was defined by the two great presences that bounded it, the earth below and the sky above, and between them the open air of the world that had never existed before the separation. Gaia felt it. She felt the quality of the sky retreating from her surface with the full awareness of the earth, feeling what had always been present, becoming what was now absent, the quality of the embrace that had been the world's first condition, becoming the quality of the separation that was the world's new condition. She felt it with the full complexity of all she had felt through the long preparation. The love and the grief and the anger and the necessity, all of them still present, all of them real, all of them hers. The sky was high above. He was still there, still the sky, still the vast and arching heaven that covered the earth from horizon to horizon, still the quality of the light and the warmth and the weather that was his nature, but high, the quality of the high that was not the quality of the coming down, not the quality of the warmth that pressed toward the surface, but the quality of the sky that remained above and sent its qualities down from the distance rather than in the fullness of the close embrace. He spoke from the high distance with the quality of the wounded sky, not in words, not in the human language of the later world, in the quality of the thunder that was his nature, expressing itself in pain and anger, the quality of the storm that was his grief expressed as the force that the sky had in the quality of its power. He spoke, and what he said was not language but curse. The quality of the sky's wounded nature directed downward toward the earth and toward the sun who had done the wounding. He cursed Kronos. He said the thing that was also a prophecy, that Kronos would be overthrown by his own child, that the act that had been done to the father would be done to the son, that the pattern of the fear and the action and the consequence would repeat itself in Kronos's own existence with the same inevitability with which it had expressed itself in Uranus's. Gaia heard it. She heard the curse of the retreating sky with the quality of the earth hearing what was true, not with the satisfaction of vindication, not with the grief of the thing confirmed, with the deep and patient awareness of the ground that had always known the shape of what was coming, that had felt the pattern in the quality of her own nature long before the pattern had expressed itself in the actions of the beings who were living it out. The separation was permanent. Uranus did not come back to the earth in the embrace. He remained at the high distance, the sky above the world, sending his light and his rain and his storms down from the distance, present in the world as the sky was present, but no longer present in the quality of the first relationship, no longer the coming down of the sky toward the earth, no longer the embrace that had been the world's original and most complete condition. The world breathed. For the first time the space between the earth and the sky was the world's breath, the open air between the two great presences, the quality of the atmosphere that was neither the earth nor the sky but the space between them, the space that all life would eventually require, the space that was the world's breath in the most literal sense, the air that the lungs of the later living world would breathe in and breathe out in the same quality of the space between the earth and sky. Kronos stood at the earth's edge. He held the sickle in the quality of the being who has done the thing, and is now in the quality of the after-doing, not triumphant, not relieved, the quality of the one who has acted on the necessary thing, and is now in the world that the acting has made, the world that is different from the world that existed before the acting, the world of the separation rather than the world of the embrace. And Gaia lay in the quality of the first morning of the new world. The sky above was high and separate and wounded. The space between them was real and open and full of the first quality of the breath of the world. And the earth was what it had always been, deep and cold and patient and entirely itself, holding in its interior the children who were still imprisoned, holding in its surface the beginning of the new age, holding in its deepest quality the full complexity of everything that had happened and everything that was still to come. The sky was high and separate, and the space between the earth and sky was real and open, and the world breathed in the quality of its first free breath, and Gaia lay in the quality of the morning of the new age, with the full complexity of everything she had set in motion held in the deep and patient quality of her own ancient nature. And the world was different from what it had been and would never be what it had been again. The Titans emerged. They came out into the light of the new world, the world with space in it, the world where the sky was above rather than pressing down, the world that had been made by the act of the sickle into the world of the separation rather than the world of the embrace. They came out with the quality of beings who had been in the quality of the old world and were now in the quality of the new one, feeling the difference between the two conditions in the specific and physical way of beings whose nature was the nature of the world's elemental forces and who therefore felt the world's condition in the most direct possible way. Oceanus moved into the full quality of his nature. The ocean had always been present as the water that surrounded the earth, the great river that circled the world at its edge. But Oceanus, moving into the full quality of the Titan age, was the ocean becoming most completely itself. The water finding the full expression of its nature in the new world that had space in it, the water filling the low places of the earth, and pressing against the shores, and developing the quality of the deep that was the ocean's own depth below the surface depth of the world. Hyperion brought the light to its full quality. The light of the Titan age had a quality that the later world would remember as different from the light of the Olympian age. Not better or worse, not more or less, but different in the way that the first expression of a principle is different from the refined expression of that principle. The quality of the light that was the light in its most elemental and most concentrated form. The light that was the sky's own nature expressed through the being who carried it before the sun and the moon had been given their specific forms. The world of the Titans was enormous and elemental. It had the quality of the first things, the quality of forces that were not yet refined into the specific and the particular, that expressed themselves in the scale of the world's own scale rather than in the human scale that the later ages would bring. The mountains of the Titan age had a quality that the mountains of the later world would only approximate. The quality of the earth's own force expressed in stone without the softening of the later geological ages, the quality of the enormous and the primary. Gaia felt the world above her surface change. She felt it with the quality of the earth feeling what moved on it and through it and across it. The Titans moving through the world in the quality of their elemental natures, each one expressing the force they carried in the particular way of the being whose nature was a world force and who inhabited the world that their nature was the force of. She felt Oceanus at the edge of the world, in the quality of the water pressing against the shore. She felt Hyperion in the quality of the light on her surface. She felt Themis in the quality of the order that was settling into the new world, like the settling of the stone into the new geological configuration that the separation had made possible. She felt Kronos take the rule. She felt him move into the quality of the rule of the world with the particular quality that was his, not the rule of the sky that Uranus had held, not the pressing down of the sky's authority over what was below it, the rule of time, the rule of the turning of things, the rule of the Titan whose nature was the force that moved everything through its changes. He took the scythe that was the symbol of his authority, and he ruled the world in the quality of the age that would later be called the Golden Age, the first age of the world under the rule of the Titans, the age before the Olympians, the age that some of the later traditions remembered as the age of perfection. The age before the complexities of the human condition had introduced the difficulties that the later ages carried. Gaia held the irony. She held it in the quality of the earth holding what it held, without commentary, without the expression of the irony in any form that the Titans could have received as irony. She held the knowledge that the son who had freed the others from imprisonment was the son who would imprison his own children, that the fear that had produced the act of Uranus would produce itself again in Kronos, that the pattern was not ending with the revolution but repeating itself in the new form that the new age provided. She had known this from Uranus's curse. She had known it before the curse, had felt the quality of it in the quality of Kronos himself, in the cutting nature that was his nature, in the quality of the being whose force was time, and whose relationship with time was the relationship of the one who turned things rather than the one who endured the turning. She had known, and she had made the sickle, and she had called to her children. And she had given the sickle to the one who would take it, and the knowing had not prevented the giving, because the giving was what the world required, regardless of what came after the giving. Rhea came to her. Rhea, the earth goddess, the earth mother, the daughter who carried in her nature the quality of the fertile surface earth that was different from but continuous with her own deep nature, came to Gaia with the quality of the daughter, coming to the mother with the thing that the mother had always known was coming. She came with the quality of the one who had lived the prophecy of Uranus, and found it true in her own body, who had felt the quality of Kronos swallowing their children with the particular grief of a mother whose nature was the mother quality of the earth, and who had had that quality violated in the most direct possible way. He had swallowed them all, Hestia and Demeter and Hera and Hades and Poseidon, 5 children swallowed by the father who had received the curse of Uranus, and had heard in the curse the prophecy of his own overthrow, and had responded to the prophecy in the way that powerful beings responded to the prophecy of their overthrow, which was to prevent it by the most direct means available to the power they possessed. The pattern was exact. Gaia felt the exactness of it with the quality of the earth feeling the return of the familiar, the fear of the powerful being for what it has produced, the action on the fear by the means of the direct power, the containment of the children in the body rather than in the stone of the world's interior, the same structure in the new form. She felt it, and she held it in the quality of the earth holding everything it held, without judgment and without surprise, with the ancient and complete awareness of the ground that had felt the pattern building and had always known the form it would take. She told Rhea what to do. She told her with the quality of the earth giving its knowledge to the one who needed it, the ancient knowledge of the ground, the knowledge of the one who had always known the shape of what was coming, and who now gave that knowledge to the daughter who was in the middle of the living of it. She told her about Crete. She told her about the cave and the quality of the deep earth, where the child could be hidden from the father who would swallow him. She told her about the stone wrapped in cloth that would be given to Kronos in place of the infant, the stone that carried the quality of the earth's own substance, given as the substitution for the child of the earth's own grandchild. Rhea went to Crete. She went with the infant Zeus in the quality of the urgency that was her nature in this moment, not the geological patience of Gaia's quality, not the slow and enormous movement of the deep earth, but the urgency of the mother whose child was in danger, the quality of the fertile earth in the moment of the protecting of what it had produced. She went and she gave birth in the cave, and she left the child in the quality of the deep earth's protection, in the cave that was the earth's own interior, offered as the sanctuary for the one who would eventually need to emerge from it. Gaia received the child. She received Zeus in the quality of the earth receiving what was entrusted to it, completely, without reservation, with the full weight of the ancient presence attending to the small and specific thing that had been given into its care. The cave of Crete was her body. The stone of it and the dark of it and the deep quality of it were her body. And the child in the cave was in the quality of the earth's own embrace, the embrace that was warm and complete and entirely without the fear that had turned the sky's embrace into the sky's imprisonment. She felt him grow. She felt Zeus growing in the cave with the quality of the earth feeling what grew in it. The slow accumulation of the divine child's strength and consciousness, and the particular quality of the being who was going to be what he was going to be. The being whose nature was the sky in a different mode from his grandfather's sky. The sky as the force of the ordered world, rather than the sky as the elemental presence of the first age. She gave him knowledge, not in the way of the teacher and the student, not in the formal transmission of information from the one who had it to the one who needed it, in the way of the earth giving its knowledge, through the quality of the ground itself, through the contact of the child with the stone and the soil of the cave, through the particular kind of knowing that came from being held in the earth's own interior, and feeling the quality of the earth from the inside, the quality that only the earth could give and that no other education could provide. She told him what was coming. She told him in the quality of the earth's communication, not in words, not in the human language of the later world, but in the vibration of the stone and the quality of the deep dark, and the particular feeling of the earth's own knowing pressing through the walls of the cave into the awareness of the growing child. She told him the shape of what was necessary, the form of the revolution that the prophecy of Uranus had established, and that his own nature was the instrument of, the path through the Titanomachy to the ordering of the world that would follow it. The child grew toward his emergence. She felt the quality of his growing in the cave with the patience that was her most fundamental nature. The geological patience of the earth that had felt the building of the mountains and the erosion of them and the building again. The patience that experienced the growth of the divine child in the cave as one more expression of the world's own processes, one more development in the long and patient unfolding of the world from its first condition toward the condition that the world's own nature was always moving toward. The Titans moved through the world above. She felt them in the quality of the earth feeling what moved on it. Kronos with his scythe, Oceanus at the world's edge, Hyperion in the quality of the light. She felt the golden age in the quality of the earth feeling the first full expression of the Titan rule. The world ordered by the elemental forces, the world before the human complexity, the world of the first full age, and she felt the quality of the ending building in it, not because the golden age was bad. It was not bad, was in many ways the most complete expression of the world's elemental nature that the world had yet achieved, but because every age carried in its fullness the seed of its own ending. The way the mountain carried in its height the condition for the erosion that would follow, the way the pressure built in the stone until the release was inevitable. The golden age was full, and the fullness was also the condition of the next thing. She waited with the quality of the waiting she had always had. The sky was high above, in the quality of the permanent separation. Uranus was distant and present simultaneously. The sky that was still the sky, that still sent its light and its rain and its storms down from the high distance, that was still the father of the Titans and the grandfather of the Olympians and the first sky that had arisen from her own being and covered the world with the quality of the first embrace. She felt the distance between them, the distance that was also the world's breath, the space that all life required, the opening that the sickle had made and that could never be closed. She felt it with the full complexity of the earth that had set the opening in motion, and lived in the world the opening had made. The earth that held the love and the grief and the anger and the necessity, in the same deep quality of the ground that held everything that was in it. The cave in Crete was warm, the child was growing, and the earth was patient in the way of the earth, entirely itself, entirely present, holding the weight of the world and the weight of the age and the weight of all the children it had produced, and all the consequences those children had produced, warm and dark and deep and entirely without the possibility of being other than what it had always been. The cave in Crete was warm, and the child was growing in the quality of the earth's own embrace, and Gaia lay in the patience of the long waiting with the full weight of all the ages in her deepest nature. And the world above moved through the quality of the golden age with the elemental fullness of the Titan rule, and she held it all in the way she had always held everything, completely, without preference, with a deep and patient awareness of the ground that knew the shape of what was coming. Zeus emerged. He came out of the cave in the quality of the growing thing emerging from the earth. Not the slow geological emergence of the mountains or the gradual emergence of Uranus from her own being, but the emergence of the living thing from the dark of the interior into the light of the world above. He came out with the quality of what he was. The sky in the mode of the conscious and the directed. The sky not as the elemental presence of the first age, but as the force of the ordered world, the force that would take the elemental quality of the Titan age and shape it into the structured quality of the Olympian age. She felt him emerge. She felt the quality of the cave releasing him, with the quality of the earth releasing what it had held in trust. The ground opening to the world above in the way of the earth releasing the seed that had been held in its dark interior through the cold season, and was now ready for the world of the light. She felt the particular quality of his emergence, different from the emergence of the Titans, different from the emergence of the Cyclops and the Hecatoncheires, carrying in it the quality of the being who had been formed in the earth's own interior, and carried that formation in the quality of his nature. He carried the earth in him. This was the gift of the cave, not only the safety of the hiding, not only the time of the growing. The quality of the earth itself had moved into the growing child, through the stone and the dark and the long seasons of the interior, had given him a quality that the sky-born could not otherwise have had. He was the sky god who had been formed in the earth, who carried in the quality of his nature the particular combination of the sky's force and the earth's depth, that was different from the pure sky quality of Uranus, and different from the pure earth quality of the Titans. He came to her. He came to Gaia in the way of the one who understood what she was and what she had given and what the giving had cost. Not with the unconscious reception of the child who takes what is offered without knowing what the offering required, but with the quality of a being who had grown in the earth's own interior, and had absorbed through that growing the quality of the earth's own knowledge, and understood something of what he owed to the oldest of all presences. She told him what he needed. She told him about the prophecy, the full quality of the thing that Uranus had spoken from the high distance of the wounded sky, the thing that Kronos had heard and had responded to with the swallowing of his children, the thing that had always been true before it was spoken because it was the nature of the pattern rather than the declaration of a specific divine will. She told him in the quality of the earth's own communication, through the stone and the soil and the deep vibration of the ground, through the quality of the oldest knowing given to the newest force. She told him about his siblings. She told him about Hestia and Demeter and Hera and Hades and Poseidon held in the interior of Kronos in the way that the Cyclops and the Hecatoncheires had been held in the interior of the earth. The pattern exact, the fear producing the containment, producing the pressure, producing the eventual release. She told him what needed to be done, and she told him what the doing would require, and she told him where the allies were that the doing would need. She told him about the Cyclops. She told him that the Cyclops were still in the deep earth, still held there by the force of Uranus's fear that Kronos had maintained rather than released, still pressing their 100 hands against the stone of the interior, still holding their contained lightning in the deep places where the light could not find its way out. She told him that the Cyclops were the key, that the thunder and the lightning that they carried and could make were the weapons that the war would require, the weapons that could not be made by any other hands in the world. She told him to free them. She told him with the quality of the earth giving its knowledge of what was necessary, not as instruction, not as the commanding of the one who had authority over the one she commanded, as the giving of the knowledge of the shape of things, the deep and patient knowledge of the ground that had felt the pattern building across all the ages and knew the form of the path through it. He went to the deep earth. He went with Métis, the oceanid of deep counsel, the one who carried in her nature the quality of the wise and the far-seeing that the act required, and together they gave to Kronos the mixture that made the Titan release what he had swallowed. Gaia felt it happening in the quality of the earth, feeling the internal movements of the large things, felt Kronos releasing the children he had swallowed, felt each of them emerging from the interior of the Titan in the reverse of the swallowing, felt the quality of the 5 Olympians finding the world above for the first time or again after the long containment. She felt the stone come out too, the stone that Rhea had wrapped in cloth and given to Kronos in place of the infant Zeus, the stone that had sat in the interior of Kronos for all the years of Zeus's growing in the cave, the stone of the earth that had stood proxy for the sky child. She felt it come out with the quality of the earth receiving its own substance back, the stone returning to the earth in the way of all stones, falling to the surface of the world at Delphi and becoming the stone that marked the navel of the world, the point of the center, the place that the later world would always associate with the oldest knowledge. The Titanomachy came. She felt the war in the quality of the earth, feeling the largest and most consequential of all the battles that had ever been fought on or above or below its surface. The Olympians on Olympus, and the Titans on Othrys, and the 10 years of the war, moving through the world with the force of divine beings at their fullest power in direct conflict. The quality of the elemental forces of the Titan Age and the organized forces of the New Age pressing against each other with the full weight of what each of them was. She freed the Cyclops. At Zeus's asking, she opened the earth to him, opened the deep places where the Cyclops had been held since Uranus's fear had put them there, opened the stone chambers and the geological layers, and brought them up through the quality of the earth's own body to the surface. She felt them emerge with the particular quality of the beings who had been in the deep for the long ages of their imprisonment, and were now in the light of the world for the first time since the beginning. They made the weapons. She felt the making in the quality of the earth, feeling the craft of the Cyclops operating on its surface. the thunder and the lightning being given their final form by the hands that had always been the hands for this making, the hands that had held the contained storm in the deep earth, and were now shaping it into the instruments that the war required. She felt the trident taking form, and the helmet of invisibility taking form, and the thunderbolts taking their final quality in the hands of the three great craftsmen, whose nature was the nature of the storm directed by the will of the Maker. They gave Zeus the thunder. She felt the quality of the thunder leaving the Cyclops' hands and entering the quality of Zeus's nature. The sky force returning to the sky god in the form that the Cyclops had made it into. The thunder that had been contained in the deep earth for all the ages of the Titan rule becoming the thunder of the new sky, the lightning of the new order. She felt it as the earth felt all transfers of enormous force, through the vibration in the stone, through the quality of the ground responding to the movement of the large and powerful things above it. The war moved through the world. She felt 10 years of the Titanomachy in the quality of the earth feeling the war, the quality of the enormous forces in conflict, the mountains shaken by the force of the divine battles, the sea disturbed by the quality of the powers pressing against each other, the quality of the world moving through the most significant transformation it had undergone since the first separation of the earth and sky. She felt the Titans fighting with the elemental force of the first age, the force of the mountains and the deep water, and the quality of the world's own elemental nature, organized into the resistance of the old order. She felt the old order losing, not with grief exactly, not the grief she had felt for the children imprisoned by Uranus, not the grief of the earth that had been made into a prison for its own offspring, with the quality of the earth feeling the pattern move through its next expression, the knowledge that the old order was old in the way that the old things were old, that the Titan age had been the first full age, and had expressed its nature completely, and was now completing itself in the way that all things completed themselves, through the arrival of the next thing. She freed the Hecatoncheires. She freed them as she had freed the Cyclops, opening the deep earth to Zeus's asking, bringing them up through the quality of the earth's own body to the surface, releasing the 100-handed ones from the long imprisonment that had begun with Uranus's fear. She felt them emerge with the quality of the most enormous of all the earth's imprisoned children emerging, the 100 hands each pressing upward through the stone, the 50 heads each rising into the light of the world. They turned the war. She felt the moment of the turning in the quality of the earth feeling the decisive shift, the Hecatoncheires joining the battle with the full force of their 100 hands and 50 heads, and the particular overwhelming quality of beings who had been held in the deep earth for all the ages of the Titan rule, and were now releasing that accumulated force in the direction of the battle that needed it. She felt the Titans overwhelmed in the quality of the earth, feeling the fall of the large and the elemental before the force of the overwhelming. The Titans fell. She felt them fall in the quality of the earth feeling the end of the Titan age, not with the dramatic swiftness of a single decisive blow, but with the quality of the enormous thing that has been in conflict for 10 years, arriving at the point of the decision. She felt Kronos fall with the particular quality of the earth feeling the fall of the one who had taken the sickle, and made the first cut. The time Titan whose nature was the cutting of things arriving at the thing that cut him. They were sent to Tartarus. She felt them go into the deep earth, into the deepest place of the earth's interior, the place below the asphodel meadows and below the chambers of the imprisoned, and below the quality of the ordinary deep, the place that was the deepest dark of the earth's own body. She felt them go with the quality of the earth receiving what was being placed in its deepest keeping. The quality of the ground taking the Titans into the most interior of all its interior places, and holding them with the weight of the world above. She felt the hecatoncheires go down with them, not as prisoners, as keepers. They were placed in Tartarus not to be imprisoned, but to be the guardians of the imprisoned. The 100-handed ones standing at the boundary of the deepest dark, to ensure that what was held there remained held. She felt the quality of the arrangement. The ones who had been imprisoned becoming the guardians of the imprisonment. The pattern finding in the hecatoncheires the beings most suited to this specific function. The Olympians took their places. She felt the quality of the new order establishing itself above her surface. Zeus in the sky that had once been his grandfather's sky, Poseidon in the ocean that had once been Oceanus's quality, Hades in the deep that was the underworld rather than the earth's own interior. She felt the new order settling into the world in the quality of the settled thing. The thing that had been in conflict finding its configuration and holding it with the force of the established. She felt the difference between the old order and the new. The Titan order had been the elemental order, the world governed by the forces that were the forces of the world's own nature, the order of the enormous and the primary. The Olympian order was the ordered order, the world governed by the forces that had organized themselves into the specific and the particular, that had the quality of the conscious and the directed, rather than the quality of the elemental and the vast. She felt the difference as the earth felt the difference between the geological age and the age that came after it. The same world, the same ground, the same deep places, but a different quality of what moved on the surface and in the sky above. Zeus came to her. He came with the quality of the new ruler, coming to the oldest presence, not with the arrogance of the victor, not with the quality of the powerful being who had won, and was now receiving the acknowledgement of what had been overcome, with the quality of a being who understood, however imperfectly, that what was in front of him was more ancient and more fundamental than anything he had won or anything he ruled. She gave him the prophecy. She gave him the knowledge that the pattern carried, that the Sky Son had overthrown the Sky Father, and that the Sky Father had overthrown the Sky Grandfather, and that the pattern was not ended by the Titanomachy, but was present in the new order in the form of the prophecy that Zeus's own child would overthrow him. She gave it with the quality of the earth giving its knowledge, not as a threat, not as the warning of an enemy, but as the knowledge of the ground that had felt the pattern across all the ages and gave it now to the one who needed it. He received it. He received it with the quality of the being who has just won the largest war in the history of the world, and is being told that the winning does not end the pattern, that the pattern is older than the winning and will outlast the winning. He received it, and he felt the full quality of what it meant. The same fear that had moved through Uranus and through Kronos, arriving now in the being of Zeus with the same quality of the powerful confronting the possibility of their own diminishment. She watched him make his choice. He chose differently from his father and his grandfather, not entirely differently. The swallowing of Métis was its own form of the containment, the own form of the fear producing the action on the fear. but differently enough. The wisdom of Métis absorbed into Zeus rather than simply imprisoned. The quality of the feared thing incorporated rather than simply excluded. She felt the quality of the choice with the awareness of the ground that had felt all the choices of all the ages, and knew the difference between the choice that simply repeated the pattern and the choice that modified the pattern, that took what the pattern had produced and found in it a form that was not identical to the forms that had preceded it. The world settled into the Olympian age. She felt it settling in the quality of the earth, feeling the new configuration of the large things, the gods in their domains, the world organized by the new order, the sky and the sea and the deep and the earth's surface, each with its divine governance. She felt it with a full awareness of the thing that had been present through all the ages and would be present through all the ages still to come. The ground beneath everything, the deep and patient earth that was older than the Titans and older than the Olympians, and would be present when the Olympian age found its own ending in whatever form the pattern next expressed itself. The sky above was Zeus's sky now. She felt the quality of the new sky, the sky of the organized world, the sky of the thunder wielder, the sky that was not the elemental presence of Uranus, but the directed force of the ruler of the new order. She felt the difference between the first sky and the new sky with the quality of the earth that had known both. The first sky that had arisen from her own being and covered her in the quality of the original embrace, and the sky of the established world that sent its weather down from the high distance in the quality of the governance rather than the quality of the relationship. Uranus was still there. He was still the sky in the deepest sense, still the vault of heaven, still the quality of the high above, still the first sky that had arisen from her own being in the beginning of the world's becoming. He was present beneath and behind and within the quality of Zeus's sky, the way the original is present within all that develops from it, the way the first condition is present in all the conditions that the first condition has produced. He was the sky before the sky was organized, the sky before the sky was governed, the sky in the quality of the first relationship. And she was the earth. She was the earth as she had always been the earth, before the sky, before the children, before the Titan age and the revolution and the Titanomachy and the Olympian order. The ground beneath all of it, the patience that underlay all the impatiences, the depth that underlay all the surfaces, the oldest presence still present in the quality of the ground that all things rested on and grew from and returned to. The world above moved through the quality of the new age, and she held it in the way she had always held everything, completely, without preference, with the full weight of the ancient awareness of the ground attending to the world it had always been and would always be. The world above moved through the quality of the new age, and the Olympians were in their places, and the sky was Zeus's sky, and the deep was Hades's deep, and the sea was Poseidon's sea, and Gaia lay in the quality of the ground beneath all of it with the full weight of the ancient awareness of the earth attending to the world it had always been. And the new age moved through its ages in the faithful way of ages, and she was what she had always been beneath all the moving. The gods came to her. They came as the gods always came to her, not with ceremony, not with the formal approach of beings making a deliberate pilgrimage to a sacred place, but in the way of beings who found themselves at the oldest threshold, whether they intended to or not, who came to the ground beneath their divine feet, in the quality of the earth simply being the ground and the ground being hers. They came to her oracles, the places where the earth's own knowledge pressed closest to the surface, where the quality of the deep knowing of the ground communicated itself most directly to the beings who stood above it and were willing to attend to what the ground communicated. Delphi was the most important. The stone that had been wrapped in cloth and given to Cronos in place of the infant Zeus, the stone that had come back from the interior of the Titan and fallen at the place that was the navel of the world, had settled into the quality of the earth at Delphi with the particular quality of a thing that had been at the center of the pattern, and had come to rest at the place that was the center of the world's surface. She felt it there, felt the particular quality of the stone that had stood proxy for the sky child in the interior of the time Titan, the stone that carried in its substance the memory of the deepest part of the pattern. She gave her knowledge there. She gave it in the quality of the earth-giving knowledge, through the vapors that rose from the deep places, through the particular quality of the ground at the navel of the world, pressing its knowledge upward through the stone and the soil toward the surface where the ones who came to ask were waiting. The knowledge was not in words. It was never in words exactly. It was the quality of the earth's own knowing communicated through the medium of the earth's own substance, received by the ones who had the particular quality of attention, that could receive what the ground communicated and find in the receiving the form of the knowledge that words could then carry. The mortals came. This was the new quality of the world, the quality of the mortal beings who had come into existence in the Olympian age, the small and brief and extraordinary beings who lived on the surface of the earth in the particular intensity of the mortal condition, who felt the ground beneath their feet with the specific quality of beings who needed it in the most direct way, who walked on it and worked it and ate what it produced, and were made from it in the most literal sense, and would return to it in the most literal sense when the brief interval of their living was done. She received them. She received the mortals with the quality that she received everything, completely, without the distinction between the significant and the insignificant, without the preference for the powerful over the ordinary. The king who came to her oracle at Delphi, and the farmer who worked the soil of the field, and the child who pressed their hands into the dark earth in the particular way of children who feel the ground with the full quality of their attention. She received them all with the same quality of the earth receiving what stood on it, and moved across it, and came from it, and returned to it. She loved the mortals, not with the love of the personal, not the love of the mother for the specific child, not the love of the companion for the particular friend, with the love of the ground for what grew in it, the love that was the most fundamental of all the loves, because it was the love of the thing that sustained for the thing it sustained, the love of the earth for the living world that the earth made possible. She loved them with the quality of the soil that was the condition of their lives, the dark soil that the rain made fertile, and the sun made warm, and the seasons moved through the cycle of the growing and the resting and the growing again. They worked her surface. She felt them working it with the quality of the earth, feeling the particular attention of the human hand on the ground, the plow moving through the soil in the quality of the blade that parted the earth for the seed going into the dark of the soil in the quality of the small thing placed in the care of the large, the roots of the growing things pressing down through the layers of the soil toward the deep water, the harvest coming up into the light in the quality of the earth giving what it had been given. She felt the quality of their making. She felt the cities building on her surface, the stone foundations pressed into the ground, the quality of the human structures establishing themselves on the surface of the earth with the particular quality of things that were made from the earth's own substance and placed back on the earth's surface in the organized form that the human mind imposed on the material. She felt the quarrying of her stone and the firing of her clay and the mining of her metals, felt all the ways the mortal world worked with the materials of her body to make the world they lived in from the world they lived on. She felt it all with the equanimity of the ancient earth, not indifference. Equanimity was not indifference, was the opposite of indifference, was the quality of complete attention without preference, the quality of the ground that attended to everything that occurred on it and within it and across it, without the distortion of the particular investment in any specific outcome. She felt the cities and the fields and the wars, and the harvests and the births and the deaths with the full quality of the earth's awareness, completely, exactly, without the softening of the personal, and without the hardening of the judgmental. She felt the deaths most completely. This was the quality of her relationship with the mortal world that was most immediate and most physical. The return of the mortal body to the earth's own substance. The quality of the living becoming the ground in the slow and complete way of the biological process. The body that had walked on the surface of the earth, returning to the interior of the earth in the quality of the earth receiving back what had come from it. She received them with the same quality she had always received what came into her. Completely, without distinction, the great and the ordinary arriving at the same ground with the same quality of the returning. She felt Uranus above. She felt him in the quality she had always felt him since the separation. The high and distant presence of the sky above the surface of the world. The quality of the vault of heaven that was still the first sky, still the sky that had arisen from her own being, still the complement of her nature in the mode of the permanent distance rather than the mode of the original embrace. She felt him in the quality of the rain that fell from the sky to the earth, the rain that was the sky's own substance given to the earth in the only form of the giving that the separation permitted, from above, from a distance, falling rather than touching. The rain was still the relationship. This was the quality of what remained between them, not the embrace of the first world, not the pressing down of the sky toward the earth in the warmth of the original contact. The rain, the quality of the sky's water falling to the earth in the particular quality of the giving that distance produced. The sky's substance traveling through the space between them and arriving at the earth's surface as the gift that made the growing possible, as the quality of the sky that the earth received in the form of the falling rather than the form of the pressing. She received it as the relationship it was, not with bitterness. Bitterness would have been the quality of a being who wanted the relationship to be other than it was, who could not receive what was given because it was not what they wanted. With the quality of the earth receiving rain, completely, without reservation, taking in the sky's water through the surface and the soil and the deep roots of the world, receiving the sky's gift in the form the sky could give it now, and finding in that form the genuine quality of the relationship that the separation had not ended, but had changed into this, into the rain and the light and the weather, that was the sky's way of touching the earth across the distance that the sickle had made permanent. The distance was also the world's breath. She held this understanding in the quality of the deep knowing, that was her most fundamental nature. The understanding that the space between the earth and the sky was not only the loss of the embrace, but also the condition of all life, the space that the living world required in order to be the living world, the air in which the mortal beings breathed and the birds flew, and the weather moved, and the light traveled from the high sky to the surface of the ground, the separation that she had set in motion with the sickle, and the calling of Kronos, had made the world livable in the way that the original embrace had not allowed. She had known this. She had known it in the quality of the knowing that preceded the doing, the earth's own deep awareness of the shape of what was necessary, present in the making of the sickle, and the calling to her children, and the giving of the blade to the one who would take it. She had known that the embrace could not continue as it had continued, that the children pressed into her interior by the fear of the sky required the release that only the separation would allow, that the world could not become the world it needed to be, while the sky pressed down to the earth and refused the space that the children of the two great presences needed in order to be themselves in the world. She had made the space, not without cost, never without cost, nothing of this depth and this significance without the full quality of the cost present in the doing. She had made the space, and the cost was in the quality of the earth that had always had the sky's warmth directly on its surface, and now had it only in the form of the rain and the light that came from the distance. The quality of the thing that had been most complete in the original condition, and was now most complete in a different way, complete in the mode of the world that had life in it, complete in the mode of the world that breathed. She breathed. She breathed in the geological way, the slow and enormous breath of the earth itself, the quality of the ground breathing, in the sense of the deep processes of the earth's interior that were the earth's own respiration, the heat of the interior, and the cooling of the surface, and the slow circulation of the materials of the earth's own body through the processes of the geological time. She breathed, and the world above her surface breathed with her. The mortals and the gods and the living things of all kinds, breathing the air that was the space between the earth and sky, breathing the world's breath in the quick way of the living rather than the slow way of the ground. The quality of the evening came. She felt the quality of the evening in the way she felt all the turnings of the sky, the light changing above her surface as the sky moved through its daily arc, the quality of the afternoon giving way to the particular quality of the late day, the warmth of the light softening into the different warmth of the evening light, the shadows lengthening on the surface of the ground in the way of shadows that were the marks of the sky's own movement across the face of the world. The surface of the earth was warm. It was warm with the warmth that the day had given it. The sky's light absorbed into the stone and the soil through the long hours of the day, and held now in the quality of the warm stone and the warm soil of the evening, the warmth of the surface that had taken the sky's gift in the form of the light, and was now returning it slowly into the air, in the quality of the evening warmth that was the earth giving back what the sky had given in the particular slow way of the ground releasing what it had received. She felt the sleeping things. She felt the quality of the living things on her surface moving toward their rest, the birds in their places and the animals in their burrows, and the mortals in the quality of the human settlements on the surface of the world, moving through the evening toward the particular crossing into sleep that was the nightly version of the deeper crossing, the nightly practice of the threshold between the waking and the other side of the waking, the small and faithful version of the ultimate return. She received them into the quality of the rest, not into death, into the ordinary rest of the living, the quality of the body releasing its waking tension and settling into the contact with the earth in the way of sleeping things, the weight of the body pressing against the ground in the quality of the most direct contact the living had with the earth beneath them, the quality of lying down on the surface of the world and feeling the world beneath the body. The earth was beneath them. This was the oldest truth and the simplest truth, and the truth that was most present in the quality of the sleeping. That the ground was there, that the oldest presence was there, that the earth that had been the first thing and would be the last thing was present beneath the sleeping body in the quality of the support that asked nothing of what it supported, that held without condition, that received the weight of all the living things that lay down on its surface with the same quality of the ground that had always been the ground. She held them. She held them in the way she had always held everything, completely, without the distinction between the deserving and the undeserving, without the quality of the judgment that the later traditions sometimes attributed to the earth, without anything that was not the simple and complete quality of the ground being the ground, being what it had always been and would always be. The weight of them was nothing to her. The weight of all the living things on the surface of the world, the mortals and the gods and the animals and the growing things, was nothing to the earth in the sense of burden, nothing in the sense of more than the earth could bear. She was the ground. She had the quality of the ground's capacity, that was not a capacity in the sense of a limit that could be approached and exceeded, but a quality of the earth's own nature that was simply and entirely adequate to what the earth was, the support of everything that stood on it, the foundation of everything that was built on it, the bed of everything that lay down on it. The quality of the deep night came. She felt it in the particular way she felt the night, not through the absence of the light exactly, though the light was absent, but through the quality of the world at rest, the particular quality of the living world in the hours when the living things were still, and the surface of the earth was most completely the surface of the earth, rather than the surface of the activity that the living things conducted on it. In the deep of the night, the ground was most purely itself, the stone and the soil and the roots of the mountains and the floor of the sea, the ground in its own quality rather than in the quality of what moved on it. Uranus was above in the quality of the night sky. The night sky was the quality of his nature that she had always loved most completely. The vast and arching darkness of the sky at night with the stars in it, the quality of the high and the open expressing itself in the most complete form that the sky had in the world of the separation, the form that was not the warmth of the day's light, but the depth of the night's darkness with the points of the stars burning in it, like the particular quality of the sky's own fire seen from the distance of the ground. She looked up at it, not with eyes. The earth did not have eyes in the biological sense, did not see in the way of the sighted beings on its surface. She looked up with the quality of the earth attending to what was above it, the particular awareness of the ground directed upward toward the sky, in the way of the thing that had always had the sky above it, and attended to the sky with the quality of the attention that the oldest relationship produced. The stars were his. They were the quality of Uranus in the form that the separation had made available. The sky in the mode of the distant and the multiple. The high vault of heaven expressing its nature in the points of light that were each their own small fire in the enormous dark of the night sky. She received the quality of the stars on her surface in the way she had always received the sky's gifts, completely, in the form they came, in the form that the separation had made the form of the giving. She was still with the quality of the deep night's stillness, not the stillness of the absence of movement, not the quality of the thing that was simply not moving, the stillness of the earth in the deep night that was the most complete expression of the earth's own nature, the quality of the deep and the patient, and the ancient ground in the hours when the living world was at rest and the surface was most completely the surface of the earth, and the deep was most completely the deep of the earth. She felt the sleeping person. She felt the quality of the one who was lying down on the surface of the world in the quality of the sleep, the weight of the body pressing against the ground in the gentle and direct way of the sleeping, the warmth of the body against the coolness of the earth's surface in the quality of the warmth that living things always brought to the surface of the ground, the breath moving in and out in the small and faithful rhythm of the living. She held them with the quality she had always held everything, completely, without condition, with the deep and patient and entirely unhurried quality of the ground that had been holding everything that lay on it since the first morning of the world, since the first moment when the first thing had come to rest on the surface of the first earth, and the earth had simply been the ground beneath it. The night was deep and warm and entirely still. The stars were in the sky above in the quality of Uranus's presence at its most beautiful, the vast dark of the night sky and the points of the divine fire burning in it, the sky that had arisen from her own being and had covered her in the original embrace and had retreated to the permanent distance and was still there, still above, still the sky. She breathed the slow and enormous breath of the ground, the breath that was not the breath of the lungs, but the breath of the earth itself, the quality of the deep processes of the geological body breathing in the way of the earth, the breath that was the world's own respiration, and the sleeping person breathed with her, the small quick breath of the living rising and falling in the rhythm of the sleep, the body releasing its tension into the quality of the ground beneath it, the weight settling deeper into the contact with the earth as the sleep deepened, the quality of the living thing returning to the most fundamental contact it had with the oldest presence. The ground was beneath them, warm and dark and deep, the oldest thing, the first thing, still here, still holding, still the ground beneath everything that had ever stood on it, or grown from it, or lain down on it in the quality of the rest. The ground that had been here before the sky, and before the children, and before the Titans, and before the Olympians, and before the mortals with their brief and extraordinary lives on the surface of the world. Still here, patient as stone, deep as the world's own interior, warm as the earth in the evening after the long day's light, holding, always holding,